I helped women interested in protecting themselves from ever developing breast cancer or protecting themselves from ever developing it again.
Welcome to Wellness, your ultimate guide to unlocking your full human potential through biohacking. I'm your host, Ashley Daly. I'm a certified sports nutrition coach, and I have a degree in kinesiology, and I'm a former personal trainer and Pilates instructor. If you're listening on YouTube, hit subscribe, as it helps listeners just like you find this hidden health information faster. Today's guest is Susan Wadia-Ells, an investigative journalist and cultural change agent. After witnessing the premature and painful deaths of numerous friends who had been successfully treated early for breast cancer, Dr. Wadia embarked on a 12-year journey of intensive research and writing. Her profound dedication, even amidst self-imposed poverty, culminated in her definitive work, Busting Breast Cancer. This book exposes what she identifies as an unnecessary breast cancer epidemic in the U.S., fueled by pervasive pink ribbon culture and dangers of toxic mammograms, and the alarming yet often undisclosed rise of recurrent metastatic breast cancer, a crisis she argues generates increasing profits for the cancer industry. Dr. Wadia holds a BA in political science from Hood College, a Master's of Arts in Law and Diplomacy and Political Economy from the Fletcher School, and a PhD in Women's Studies from the Union Institute. She is also the author of 2 books, one on women's adoption experiences and the other exploring the biological link between birth control drugs and breast cancer. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure.
Your book is one of my favorite books that I've ever read, Susan, and I have to tell you, when I read it, it made me not fear breast cancer. So where I would love to start is a little bit of your background story so my listeners can learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. And the first thing one should know is I don't have a medical background. I don't even have a biology background, but I just lost so many good friends to metastatic breast cancer. This was about 15 years ago. I've continued to lose a number more. And so I decided I didn't want to get the disease. I wanted to understand why so many friends were developing it and how myself and many others could protect ourselves, could prevent breast cancer from developing. And so it's been a 15-year journey. The book came out a few years ago. And sadly, what I've learned is we're looking at a cancer industry that loves to make money and doesn't like to look at the important biology behind cancer, which we finally understand. And we've only understood it since about 2012, when a book was published by a Boston College biologist, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and it's called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. That cancer is not a genetic, we don't know why you got it. Cancer is, we understand. Now you've described your life to me. We understand why you developed breast cancer. So it's a wonderful time for us to know that we can prevent and protect ourselves from breast cancer.
Yes. Well, Susan, I feel like that's just tip of the iceberg of your work. So can we dive into these 5 important components that we should pay attention to make sure that we don't end up with breast cancer like so many friends that you've lost?
Right. Yes. So this is the book for people who haven't seen the cover. It's wonderful. It has a healthy mitochondria and an unhealthy mitochondria, because mitochondria is where cancer begins. And this is not just breast cancer. This is colon cancer. This is all types of cancer. And the mitochondria are the power batteries in each of our cells. And breast cells have maybe 70 or 80 little power batteries, little mitochondria in them. Brain cells have thousands, because we need more energy in our brain than we do in our breast. And by the way, all breast cancer is happening in the lining of the breast ducts, the lining of the breast lobe. So that's just an important piece to always remember. But the 5 simple steps, because the book's title is Busting Breast Cancer, 5 simple steps to keep breast cancer out of your body. And those 5 simple steps are kind of shocking to a lot of people. One is never have a mammogram. That's probably the most shocking. The second is keep your blood level, your vitamin D3 blood level, above 60 nanograms per milliliter, which is a very tiny amount in your blood, but it's important to get it there and keep it there, and maybe even make it higher, because that measures the strength of your immune system. And when your mitochondria start to go rogue, you want that immune system come in there and wipe them out so they don't go rogue on you, so they don't start a cancer cell going on in your body. So the third simple step is get rid of your excess body weight, which is, I mean, 2/3 of women in America today are either overweight or morbidly obese. We're talking like 30, 40 pounds or more overweight. Even 15, 20, 25 pounds is not a good deal. And another one is to be completely, the fourth is to keep detoxing yourself from all the toxins that we're taking in from our unorganic food from the sky. They're now spraying with these who knows chemicals. That's why a lot of us don't have sun a lot of the times. That's why there's a lot more rain than there used to be. We're being bombarded with nastiness from the sky, unfortunately, and we need to keep cleansing our bodies. And there are 25,000 ways of cleansing your bodies. But one basic way, especially when it comes to breast cancer, is to keep your lymph system moving. And you do that with dry skin brushing before you take a shower. You do that by various exercises, because the only way you can pump the lymph and it can pick up toxins, and which you want it to do, and you can pump it out, is by your movement. You're brushing your breasts, you're brushing your whole body, or just moving your whole body to keep your toxins flowing. And the fifth is why we have so much more premenopausal breast cancer today. And that's because so many more women are using hormone-based pills, injections, IUDs. They have the hormone. This hormone is called progestin. And it's a chemical form of that wonderful natural hormone we all have and need, which is progesterone. Progesterone is preventative. It's wonderful. This progestin that they're shoving into all of the birth control, the hormonal birth control pills and IUDs, we now understand exactly how it both initiates and accelerates breast cancer.
Thank you for painting that picture for us.
You know, before we go much further, Ashley, should talk about how that first cancer cell begins, because once you understand that, then you really understand how to prevent breast cancer from beginning.
Okay, let's start there, Susan. I'd love that.
Okay, good. And this is all in chapter 1 in my book. And this is what I learned from reading this huge textbook, biology college level biology textbook by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, the Boston College biologist who should win the Nobel Prize. He, in 2012, after 10 plus years of working on the cancer thing, he's a geneticist. He had worked on genetic issues for decades. And he was the first to say, hello, cancer is not a genetic disease. It is not something that starts because you have some wacko gene in the nucleus of your cell that somehow goes rogue. No, it's a metabolic disease, and it starts when you suffocate some of the little power batteries in your colon, and that starts the colon cancer. In your breast, that starts the breast cancer. And how do you suffocate the mitochondria? Lots of different ways. Lots of things become like acid, attacking the mitochondria in your cell. And once that cell gets attacked, it always, for us to live, is processing oxygen when it's healthy. So in the cover of my book, we've got a happy, healthy, see the pink the pink cell with a lot of these little green, like they look like amoeba. Those are the healthy, the green, happy, and there are lots of them, mitochondria. Once you suffocate your mitochondria, it looks like that thing. And it's not healthy anymore, and you lose a lot of them, and all of a sudden they are suffocating. They're no longer respiring or processing or using oxygen to exist. And of course, if you suffocate us right now, we're going to die in a few minutes, because every healthy cell in our body, really, we have to have the oxygen. What are we going to do without it? We're not going to live very long. And that's what happens when you suffocate the mitochondria in your breast cells or in your colon cells or in your liver cells. that's when the cancer begins. So the mitochondria starts to suffocate. It can call out to your immune cells, like your macrophage and your T cells, please come help suffocate me, help get rid of me. That's a natural biological situation. When your cells get old, they call out to your immune system, help wipe me out. I'm no good anymore. I'm not working very well. And it's called apoptosis. So we're always making new cells and getting rid of the old ones. When we suffocate, let's say the mitochondria in a number of our breast cells, if our immune system, if our vitamin D3 blood level is not strong enough, we can't call in our immune system to wipe it out. So what's it do? It basically suffocates, and instead of dying, those mitochondria, they are smart little deals. They know how to start becoming like a parasite. They know how to start fermenting, just like that compost heap in your backyard. You got little bacteria underneath in the pile, and you add more gunk to it. You add more glucose to it, and those little the little parasitic, in your black earth there, they're just they just multiply. They duplicate endlessly. And that's what happens to your mitochondria when it suffocates. It starts to eat only the glucose you're putting in your body. And instead of functioning as a healthy cell should, as in your breasts or in your colon, it just starts to it loses its mind. It starts to duplicate over and over again, and you're forming a tumor. And those tumors we know are not very nice. And so they can block out things. Now, keeping cancer in your breast, you don't need your breast. It gets pretty ugly, I guess, if you don't stop the tumor from forming. But a tumor in your breast by itself is never going to kill you. But what happens is that tumor starts to get bigger, or not even bigger, but it's somehow a cancer cell can fuse from that tumor into your with a macrophage, which has come to it's part of your immune system. And that macrophage can go anywhere in your body to go heal it. But once the macrophage fuses with a cancer cell, whoa, it's just going to carry that cancer cell to other parts of your body. And that's why you want to get rid of small tumors by starving them. So you don't want it to continue to grow, and you don't want to do a biopsy. Whenever the surgeons poke your tumor with a needle, they have the option, too often, unfortunately, that one of the cells, the cancer cells, can come out because they're not attached to each other. They're like little bees in a beehive. And that's when you can begin to have metastatic cancer, which is what I was shocked to find out. So biopsies are another way to prevent, not cancer, but to prevent metastatic cancer.
Thank you so much for that detail, because I did have someone on my show who had breast cancer twice, and she was talking about the dangers of getting it biopsied, because then you can spread the cancer cells.
Yes, that's called the seed and soil theory. It was developed in 1899, I think. Yeah.
Let's dive into mammograms.
The one that gets people really upset, and I can be in front of an audience of 20 or 200 or 2,000, and I'll say, okay, I don't want anybody to think. I just want you to react. And this is how I'll start off some of my talks. What is the best way to prevent breast cancer? And always someone will yell, mammograms. And I'll say, how does a mammogram prevent breast cancer? How does it prevent it? Well, it prevents early death. I mean, everybody's faces go, huh? Prevent. Huh? And then someone will call out, well, it prevents early death. It doesn't even do that. A mammogram will screen your boobs to see if you have abnormal cells, to see if you have a teeny weeny tumor like this. Mammograms don't even usually show a large lobular tumor. That for some reason they don't go into the lobes. And if women have dense breasts, which means more muscle than fat, which is the majority of women in the world, by the way, and certainly the majority of premenopausal women, it just, everything seems black. It doesn't see anything. So a mammogram is one, it's outdated, it's barbaric, it's painful, and it doesn't show with many women the problem, but what it does show, and this is why the industry today will never give up mammograms, because what it does is 40% of women who are told each year, oh, we're so sorry, but your mammogram report shows that you have cancer. But don't worry, it's an early stage. We caught it early. It's like the size of a pea. Don't worry, we're going to poke it with a needle, and we're going to see what kind of little tumor that is. And then we're going to fix you, take your money and fix you. Now, that little pea, they call that stage 1 breast cancer. Most of the time, that little pea of a tumor has been there for 20 years. It's going to go to your grave with you. If you leave it alone, life will be fine. And if you decide you want to get rid of it, then we can talk about how you might want to do that without chemo, without radiation, without surgery. But that's what mammograms do. They overdiagnose about 40% of women who have a single mammogram. The other way they overdiagnose women and terrify them. I mean, who's going to be calm when you're told by a doctor you have cancer? Hello? And so the other way is they take the mammogram and they say, no, you're so lucky. You do have cancer, but it's stage 0. Now, I don't know about you, Ashley, but I've always been taught that 0 was 0. 0 meant nada, nothing. 0, no, 0. Not even 1, no, 0. But that's what they call it. They used to call it abnormal cells, but that wasn't dramatic enough. Then they went on to ductal carcinoma in situ. They got carcinoma in there. So it says, it means you've got cancer in your duct, but it hasn't gone anyplace. But the reality is those abnormal cells are not cancerous. And the studies have shown that women, but they then treat it. They want to do a biopsy of the area that has the abnormal cells to see what kind of abnormal cells. And they have bad abnormal cells and okay abnormal cells. And they have different treatments. And meanwhile, you're petrified. I've got cancer. You say to so many women when they say, oh, yeah, I'm glad you did the book, Susie. You know, thank heavens I was lucky. Mammogram showed I had breast cancer 15 years ago, and I had the treatment, and I'm fine. And I say to them, well, what stage was it? They go, oh, I don't know. It was cancer. That's all I know. And they treated it, I'm fine. Women are not going to know the difference between 0 and stage 3. And in fact, most stage 2 and 3 tumors, which are significant and need to be dealt with, hopefully metabolically, not with the chemo and radiation, but most of the women find those tumors ourselves because touching, doing breast massage is really good. Doing self-exams is critical. That's how most of the advanced tumors are found, by women's self-exams and clinical self-exams. Now, sadly, the the Susan G. Komen, who we used to think were friends of women, they are not. They are controlled by the pharmaceutical company, and they won't give a nickel to any women's clinic, any women's program that teaches breast self-exams or allows clinical breast exams or thermograms. You can't, and a thermogram is an alternative. It's quite different from a mammogram, but it's an alternative to see if you have the beginnings or the existence of a cancerous tumor, or if you have inflammation. I mean, inflammation is what starts this disease. So if your body is inflamed because you're overweight or whatever, you have a lot of dry cleaning fluid going in you because you've got a closet filled with plastic covered clothes that are filled with dry cleaning fluid, and whenever you rip out that plastic, you're being inundated with this nasty chemical, and you're breathing it in, and that'll suffocate your mitochondria, in your breasts. That's sort of an estrogenic kind of thing. So I've gotten carried away here with my mammograms, so you're going to have to get me back on track.
Well, I can hear the passion in your voice, so I'm really thankful for it. But we were starting down the track of why they're controversial, why you don't recommend them. You did say something about thermography. So let's take this road of what are our alternatives if it's not mammograms?
Right. Yes, every woman should have a thermogram annually. The first time you have a thermogram, they're going to want to do two within like a 5-month period. They're trying to get what your baseline heat is. And they're just taking a heat, it's science is interesting, right? This is a heat-based image. So it's looking at the different levels of heat coming out of your breasts. And you can do a whole body thermogram too, which sometimes is much better, but at least the breast thermography. And this heat-based image shows that, so you have one spot that's pretty significant, that's much hotter than the rest. That indicates in most cases you have a cancerous tumor, because we know that the cancer cells, once those little mitochondria have suffocated, they're going to be duplicating themselves really fast, much faster than a healthy cell. They lop along. But the cancer cells are galloping. And so that's when you want to have an ultrasound, a sonogram, or however they call it these days. And the ultrasound will usually show if it's a solid tumor or if it's a cyst that's filled with water. And once you know that, there's a great difference. The cysts usually come and go in many women. They'll tell you they have cystic breasts and they've always lumpy breasts and they've had those forever and they watch them, but that's it. But so then you can go have an ultrasound. Now, the sad thing is you have to be a very, very strident woman, because many doctors will say, the insurance company won't let me write an order for an ultrasound unless you first have a mammogram. Because apparently the insurance companies make out like bandits too. But that's what, and maybe the medical industry has said, don't allow women to be covered for one. Thermography is not covered. They say, oh, it's not used, not very helpful. Have a mammogram. Ultrasound, have a mammogram first, and then we'll pay for your ultrasound. So you have to basically get a doctor who's willing to stand up to the insurance companies. And those doctors, sometimes they're hard to find. Or what they have now are, they call them concierge ultrasound clinics. And they're used a lot by families, couples who say, oh, we're pregnant, let's see how things are going. Is it a boy, or they're twins, or whatever? And so you can have ultrasounds done without going to a hospital, just in a concierge clinic. You have to pay for it yourself. It's like $200, I think. But at least you can then bypass the mammogram, and then you can, see if it's a solid tumor or if it's a cyst, and that's really kind of important. If it's a solid tumor and it's large, or if it's a solid tumor and it's small, then you can begin to manage it metabolically, and that's another thing we can talk about. But mammograms have become the feeder industry to today's unnecessary breast cancer epidemic. They love their mammograms. That's why they've got Susan G. Komen basically telling you, don't touch your breasts. You don't know what you're doing. Don't touch your breast. Just go have a mammogram. Don't let your doctor touch your breast. That's the American Cancer Society has written that. It's all in my book, and I copy their verbatim words, their article, that says that.
You had mentioned dense and lumpy breasts, which I know a lot of women can be afraid of. So tell us why we shouldn't be afraid.
Go have thermography. And, the lumps apparently for many women stay there all the time. And they get comfortable. They get to know their breasts. They have a thermogram. They see that those are lumps and there's no heat coming out of them, anything different from their healthy cells. So they're fine. This is fascinating. Actually, when it was toward the end of my work on this book, and I realized I hadn't really, and everybody was talking about dense breasts. Oh, yeah, you have to have a mammogram and to see if you have dense breasts. Well, what's that about? And they kept saying, well, because if you have dense breasts, it means you have a proclivity. Your risks of developing breast cancer are much greater if you have dense breasts. Don't you know that? I'm like, no, I don't know that. Why? What biologically, what's the problem with dense breasts? mean, most small-breasted women have dense breasts. I think 80% of Japanese, Chinese women have dense breasts. 55% of American women have dense breasts, certainly when they're premenopausal. And so it's like, well, why? I've never heard the biological reason about dense breasts have a proclivity for more breast cancer. I ended up spending a couple of months looking at every epidemiological, biological study on dense breasts. And what I've learned, there really is no biological connection that we can find between dense breasts and breast cancer. And so then you look at the statistical studies, and they say dense breasts, if you have dense breasts, you have a bigger chance of getting breast cancer. And then they would take 3,000 women with dense breasts and 3,000 women with fatty breasts. And they would follow them until they were 75, 85 years old, or maybe till their death. The one study, most of them said we couldn't find any greater amount of people who developed breast cancer with dense breasts than with fatty breasts. And one of them said, it was like 3,000 women in each of the groups. They found one more woman in the dense breast group that had cancer. So if with 3,000 women in each group, let's say 100 were diagnosed with breast cancer in the fatty breast crowd, and 101 were diagnosed with breast cancer in the dense breast crowd. So the doctor who was paid to comment on this said, even though there was a very slight difference between the fatty and the dense breast people with breast cancer, there was one. One more in the dense breast. She literally had enough guts to say that because they must have paid her some money to be a consultant to the study, right? It's all about money, money. Okay?
That's where it's all pointing to.
It's all, yes. There are thousands of each chapter. Here, I'll give you an example. This happens to be the chapter, what is it, on, breast cancer, on mammograms. So this becomes a reference book for practitioners as well as for women interested in protecting themselves from ever developing breast cancer or protecting themselves from ever developing it again. They get much smarter that second time around if they've read this book. You just can't let them scare you, but it's so easy to scare people. I mean, cancer's terrifying. It doesn't have to be. And we can talk more about managing it too, because cancer becomes manageable in 99% of the cases.
I would love to dive into that, Susan, because as I mentioned in the beginning, your book made me not afraid of cancer, not just breast cancer, but all cancer. So let's talk about steps to manage it and why we shouldn't be afraid.
Okay. So Dr. Seyfried, who I've mentioned a few times, who has been mentoring me, by the way, I wrote him, I read about his book and by a psychiatrist who has written her own book now on ketogenic diets, using them for psychiatry. But she heard him speak at Harvard in 2012, 2013, when his book had just come out. And she was really good at translating into layperson terms what he goes into great depths in scientific terms. And I quickly understood what he had found. And I quickly wrote to him and I said, I'm doing this book and this has been my history. I can't find anyone talking about the origin of a cancer cell. Just eat peanut butter, don't eat peanut butter, eat blueberries, don't eat blueberries, but we don't know why. You know, with all these things, do's and don'ts, but we don't know why it doesn't affect breast cancer or it creates it. I mean, they were useless studies. And anyway, so he basically, and this is why he should win the Nobel Prize, he added on to a German guy by the name of Otto Warburg, who was back in the 30s, and he was half Jewish, and Hitler didn't let him die because Hitler's mother had breast cancer, and Otto Warburg had died from it. And Otto Warburg had begun to realize that cancerous cells are suffocated. They're not processing oxygen anymore. They are processing sugar, glucose. And so Otto Warburg has been completely ignored by today's genetic-based cancer industry. They don't want you to know about Otto Warburg, and they don't teach that in medical schools. Otto Warburg won a Nobel Prize, not because of this, but prior to his discovery that cancer cells don't process oxygen. And so Thomas Seyfried said, this is fascinating. And so he started working with his mice and his rats in his lab with all of his lab staff and stuff. And they realized that, yes, certainly glucose is a big feeder. Every cancer cell, you don't give it glucose, it's not going to do very well. You've got to, put the bread and the pasta and the sugar in your mouth, and you'll really be feeding up those cancer cells like crazy. But they also realized if you took all the carbs away, all the sugar, the carbs, the carrots, the peas, the sugar away, some of them were still doing pretty good. They were still thriving. They weren't as healthy before, but they were still duplicating. They really hadn't given up the ghost. And he figured out, and don't ask me how, but he figured out there's a second fuel for every cancer cell, and that's glutamine. Now, glutamine is the most prevalent and the most important amino acid our body makes and our healthy cells desperately need to stay alive and healthy. And so now to manage cancer, it's one thing to block the glucose. I mean, you have to work. They don't have a great pill yet. They're getting them, but they don't really have it. You just pop a couple of pills and it blocks the glucose and you can eat your banana split, or your brownie or your piece of bread. They don't have that pill yet, but they're getting close. But right now you go on a strict ketogenic diet, which can mean fasting for a few days, fasting every other day, and eating very little food, but lots of fat, moderate protein, and the only carbs you want are like some leafy greens. And you basically can start to starve your cancer cells. In terms of the glutamine, how do you block the glutamine from also feeding those cancer cells? He's figured out that there's something called DON that is not allowed at this point to be sold to humans. He can feed it to his rats and his mice, but there are no places that'll sell it for human consumption. But apparently it's been used before. So what they're using now instead of this DON are these repurposed anti-parasitic medicines. And no one has told me this, but parasites are fermenting. That's common knowledge, that parasites are the only animal that doesn't process oxygen, processes glucose that they ferment. So it makes sense, if you've got a fermenting cancer cell here, that an anti-parasitic such as ivermectin, which has been great for prevention of COVID, they're anti-parasitics, and you take a small amount of them. Dr. Seyfried calls it, to manage cancer effectively, the press pulse theory. And the pressing is you just block that glucose. So your cancer cells are like, help us, we're starving. We're not giving us any glucose. You're not putting glucose in your body. This is not good. And then once you've really rid your body of most of the glucose, you pop a little bit of these anti-parasitics in your mouth, and very, very often, maybe more often than not, they are able to zap. It's a small amount, so they're only going to zap those starving cancer cells. It's not enough of them to harm the glutamine going into your healthy cells. So it works. I helped a woman about a year and a half ago, was diagnosed with, they call it de novo metastatic breast cancer. It's a very small amount of people with metastatic breast cancer who are diagnosed with de novo. Usually it's recurrent. De novo means it's the first time anyone was ever aware they had breast cancer. And when they found it, it had already gone to different parts of the body. It just wasn't left in the breast. Recurrent metastatic breast cancer is what my friends all had, except for one. She had de novo. And then 2 months, 2 years, in some cases a decade more later, you're not feeling well, something's not going well, and you're diagnosed with recurrent metastatic breast cancer, which means that original tumor that they, quote, took care of, they didn't. They let something escape into the rest of your body with their treatment. This now friend did only the metabolic approach. She did have a biopsy, but at that point she said, you're not going to radiate me, you're not going to chemo me, and you're not even going to do surgery. I referred her to a physician down in Nashville who he calls himself a sex cancer doctor. So he does prostate, ovarian, breast cancer. He used hyperbaric oxygen. She went immediately into a no glucose environment. Then they used the anti-parasitics, but she used metabolic, and she's managing that de novo metastatic breast cancer, which in most cases, if she had gone to a regular cancer clinic, the best in the world, she'd be dead by now. Or just, chemoed out, she would not be a healthy person. She's healthier now. That's the other thing. When you use metabolic treatments, you end up a healthier person than when you started. Because most people who develop, let's say, breast cancer, any cancer, they've got a lot of other issues going on. They're not really healthy people when you start to look at it. And with breast cancer, for some reason, they don't know, high stress really hits those breast cells. When you have constant, like you're running from the tiger 24/7. It's okay to run from the tiger for 3 minutes and get up that tree, and then he goes away and you calm down again. But if you get up in the morning, you go, I can't deal. I mean, it's my job, it's my relationship, it's my kids, it's my mother, it's my whatever, and you stay there. Cortisol levels are up there, and they're slamming into your mitochondria. They are suffocating those mitochondria in your breast cells. You put a woman in a really high stress situation, and they usually develop breast cancer. It's uncanny. It's terrifying. So when I talk about detoxification, one of the most important things women can do is detoxify from stress.
What happens if we have the gene for breast cancer and we've been given the recommendation to maybe cut off one or both of our breasts?
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up. I get so sad. I mean, Angelina Jolie, that was the stupidest thing that incredible actress ever did. And I mean, her mother she died of ovarian cancer, her mother, at like 50 or whatever. And she had, I don't know, it was a broken BRCA2. She might have had a mutated BRCA2 gene. We all have a BRCA1 and a BRCA2 and a P53 gene in our mitochondria, in our little power batteries. There they are. These are good guys, these BRCA1, BRCA2, and the P53. Why are they good guys? Because I call them night watchmen. And if your cell starts to suffocate for whatever reason, you're overweight, you live on a golf course, these are 3 night watchmen, which are really our pals, right? Now, 10% of women who are Ashkenazi Jews have an inherited, what they call a mutated BRCA1, and it's a smaller percent have a mutated BRCA2 gene. And what that means is it's broken. So if these genes, these night watchman genes are not broken, when your cell starts to suffocate, these night watchmen, they're great. They'll flip out some protein that basically helps annihilate the cell and the apoptosis and helps destroy it, so it doesn't start to suffocate and create a nasty breast tumor. And so if you have a mutated BRCA1, let's say, you have only 2 night watchmen who are going to be useful. The 1 night watchman that's broken is broken. It's not going to do anything but sit there, but it's not going to help suffocate that breast cell that starts to go rogue, those mitochondria, when they start to suffocate. So you don't have as much protection. You have 1/3 less protection from your night watchman. So breast cancer is so prevalent in the United States today. We talked about 2/3 of the women are overweight. They have you do mammograms where they're going to grab you no matter what, et cetera, et cetera. So that you'll find that women who have a broken BRCA1 gene or a broken BRCA2 gene have a higher propensity to develop breast cancer than women who have all 3 working night watchmen. Okay? Now, what I find is very interesting, and this study is in my book. They did a study of Polish women, and who have a broken BRCA1 gene, and a study of North American women, that would be Canadian and US women, who have a broken BRCA gene. And in the US, something like 70% of women with a broken, let's say, BRCA1 gene develop breast cancer before they turn 73. Okay? In Poland, it's like 48%. Now, so if you have a broken BRCA gene, move to Poland. But why? What's Poland gonna? How's Poland gonna protect you as it protects its Polish women with broken BRCA genes that the U.S. doesn't protect you? I mean, that was an interesting question, right? So I was feeling a little giddy because I was at the end of my research, and so with tongue-in-cheek, I created the Polish women's breast cancer prevention lifestyle. And one of them, let's say, is food. The difference between a Polish diet and an American diet is huge. What's the most popular vegetable in America? The two most popular vegetables in America, Ashley.
Potatoes and corn?
Very good. Very good. You read the book. She's cheating everybody. She read my book. Okay. In Poland, and any Polish people listening to your podcast, what are the two most popular vegetables?
I don't know. Is it something green?
Stuffed cabbage. Cabbage, right?
Oh.
And cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and broccoli. I don't know about broccoli, but Brussels sprouts, cabbage. They're eaten cruciferous vegetables every day of their lives in 50 different forms, okay? And cruciferous vegetables have this, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, indole something or other, which is really good at detoxification.
Yes, I like that. Yeah. Okay, well now,
yeah,
I would be remiss.
Yeah.
Yes, what?
Go ahead. Well, I'm realizing also Polish women don't use progestin contraceptives. American.
Oh, I was just going to ask you about birth control.
That's right. You go down the 5 simple steps and you look at Polish women, and they're goody two shoes in all respects. Their diet, I don't know about the weight. I'm not going to speak up for Polish women in terms of the weight, but the foods they're eating to maybe be overweight are good. But the overweight, those excess fat cells, they're never good. Excess fat cells in boys and girls they're like very weak estrogen producers, but they're 24/7. The estrogen factories are going 24/7 in all of your excess fat cells. And those excess fat cells, when you put vitamin D3, 30,000 IUs, 10,000 IUs, or get a suntan, whatever, all of, a third or a half of the vitamin D3 that you're ingesting and developing in your body gets stored. It gets indolent, stored in your fat cells. So it doesn't help you. It doesn't rev up your immune system. But once you lose, 30% or something of your excess fat, the fat cells let go of the D3 and your D3 shoots up. So it's another reason to go on a diet if you're trying to get rid of 15 to 1,500 excess pounds. Your D3 will go up by itself. So that's
great
nice.
point.
That's nice. Yeah, but in terms of Polish women, they do not use hormonal contraceptives very much at all, and postmenopausal, there's a progestin-based menopausal relief drug called Prempro, and there are 5 other names to them too. And they will increase your risk of breast cancer by at least 26% within a 3-year period. We've done a massive study, came out in 2002, and they stopped this national study because they showed that postmenopausal women who were using the Prempro versus the placebo had palpable tumors. 24% more of them had palpable.
We're on a bit of a roll by saying it really depends on what we eat, the vitamin D levels that we have, cleaning up our diet. What other kind of actionable steps do you have for us, Susan?
Well, we really didn't talk about the progestin. That the progestin that is in and has been in birth control drugs since the 60s, the late 60s, when they first came out. They've maybe lowered the amount of progestin, but there's still progestin in there. And state cancer boards have shown us, but that data is never published. It's shown us that since about 1980 at least, each state has experienced, we're talking premenopausal women younger than 50, that there's been a 1 to 2% increase in premenopausal breast cancer annually ever since the early 80s. That data has never been out there. Now, since the COVID jab was rolled out and people are dying suddenly and people are having, quote, the turbo cancer, their immune systems have been killed, they're now saying, oh my heavens, more and more younger women are getting breast cancer. Oh my, we've never seen this before, but we have. They just haven't shared that data. And again, this is all in my book. And we understand exactly why the premenopausal women are developing and have been developing so much breast cancer. And the reason is it's the progestin chemical that they're using in 98% of the IUDs today. They're using it in 100% and have always used it. 100% in the birth control pills, in the patches, in the jabs, in the implants. It goes on and on. And the saddest thing I discovered, Ashley, in this book, and I talk about it at length in chapter, 4 maybe, on why no hormonal birth control, is because in October of 2010, a blue ribbon international panel, after studying for 10 years, trying to figure out what does progestin, is there a connection between progestin and breast cancer? And they figured it out. But what they figured out, and they published it in Nature magazine, and again, I give excerpts from that study, I give the name of the study, I published the press release that the announcing laboratory published, and that press release was titled, How Birth Control Drugs Initiate and Accelerate Breast Cancer. That was the name, the first part of the title of that press release. And that data, that information, that study has never been publicized by mainstream media. And why? We know why. Because mainstream media, we now all realize, has been completely funded by the pharmaceutical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry makes billions by selling birth control drugs and more billions by creating breast cancer. And so there we are. And the reason they don't want to publish that, or they have published it, but the reason they don't want to promulgate it or publicize it, is because it shows that progestin, now I'm reading between the lines, but no one has contradicted me at this point. It suffocates the mitochondria in the breast cells. So as soon as a woman is putting in this progestin in her mouth every day, or has it shot in her arm for a 3-month period or whatever, her body is being flooded with progestin, and that progestin acts like acid on the breast mitochondria, on those power batteries. And we know once you suffocate the mitochondria, they connect with the nucleus in their cell and they say, woo, you better start that oncogene duplicating everything. And if your immune system's not strong enough, it sits there and watches this happen. It doesn't come in and annihilate that initial breast cancer cell. And so that's why premenopausal women are getting so much breast cancer, and that's why they're making so much money on birth control drugs, because they don't allow hormone-free IUDs in this country. They have blocked it. We have one that existed a long time ago, but it's one size fits all. It's called Paragard. And in 1999, the FDA overnight for no explicable reason, decided that instead of categorizing birth control, the IUD, the hormone-free IUD, as a medical device, which it is, and it had been for 30 years, they decided, oh no, there's a touch of copper in that copper IUD, that hormone-free IUD. That copper, that's what's doing it. So that's a drug. So it's not a medical device. No. That little copper in there, and it's not a medical device. It's a drug. Now, when you introduce a new drug into the U.S., you have to do double-blind placebo-controlled studies. These hormone-free IUDs are good for 8, 10, 12 years. So the head of marketing of Mona Lisa, which is a Belgian-based hormone-free IUD company, she wrote to me, and she said, the reason we don't sell our products, we have different makes, models, sizes, because we all have different size uteruses, different size feet, different size noses, we've got different size uteruses. You need to have an IUD that fits your uterus. But she said, the reason we can't sell any of our products in the U.S. is it's too expensive. We would have to spend $15 million or maybe more for a $30 medical device. So what I say in my book is if women want a hormone-free contraceptive that fits and is safe, take a trip to Mexico, take a trip to Europe, get fitted with an IUD, a hormone-free IUD that is perfectly fitted to you. Don't wait and bring it home. Planned Parenthood's not allowed to insert a foreign-made IUD that hasn't been approved by the U.S., by the FDA. They cannot insert that in you. You've got to buy it over there for $35 and then have it inserted, and you're good for 12 years. Wow. Right now, the Paragard costs 50 cents. This one size fits all. The only one on the U.S. market that's hormone free. They're charging women over $1,000 for a 50-cent device.
It all comes full circle, right, Susan? It's all about the money.
It's all about the money. And as I say, my graduate work's in political economy. So when I started this book, I didn't think I was going to become my political economist part. I thought I was just, going to have to learn a lot of biology. No, I used everything I knew about political economy. And it's Uncle Jack, follow the money. It's disgusting. And of course,
that's
breast
right.
cancer, they promote breasts, what size breasts, and she's got American women have the largest breasts in the world.
I really enjoy talking to you, and I love how open-minded you are and passionate about getting your work out into the world so more people are aware of it. But Susan, as we wrap up this podcast, I ask all my guests the same closing question, which is, what haven't I asked you that you'd like my listeners to know?
Oh, well, someone said to me after I was giving a talk up in Maine a couple of years ago, they said, well, so what can we do? And I said, that's like a planted question. That was very good because my book ends and this talk will end. Is the only way we can end this unnecessary breast cancer epidemic is one woman at a time. So if you're unwilling to lose that weight, if you're unwilling to tell your daughter, go to Europe and get a hormone-free IUD, stop taking those pills. If you're willing to take these steps and say to your doctor, stop sending me reminders on mammograms, I'm not going to have them anymore, and read this book because I'll tell you why I'm not going to have them anymore. And if you're not having a thermography every year, one woman at a time is how we're going to stop this breast cancer epidemic.
Yes. Oh, I love it so much. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, for sharing your time and wisdom. You look amazing. Tell everybody where they can go to find you.
Thank you. Well, what I'm doing now is social media. I have an Instagram and Facebook, but basically the important thing is to get the ebook or the book itself and just start to read because it all makes so much sense. And as you've said, Ashley, reading the book took your fear of cancer away. and it is a preventable disease, period, on there.
Well, we will make sure to point listeners in the right direction. Susan, thank you so much for your time today. This podcast is a labor of love, and I'm dedicated to providing free content for years to come. If an episode has brought you joy, clarity, or valuable insights, your support means so much to me. A quick shout out on Instagram or sharing this podcast with a friend can make a big difference. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, a great way to help support the show, or even on YouTube, is by leaving a review. You can also help support my work by using any of the affiliate links that I leave in my detailed show notes, or visit my website, ashleydaily.com. I'm most active on Instagram if you're looking for me, so you can find me at Ashley_Daily. Thank you for helping me keep this podcast alive. This podcast is presented for educational and exploratory purposes only. Published content is not intended to be used for diagnosing or treating any illnesses, disease, or disorders. Those responsible for this show disclaim any responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of this information presented by myself or my guests. Please consult with your healthcare provider before using any products or services referenced in this podcast. This podcast may contain paid endorsements for products or services. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions or standards of the policy of my guests. This podcast and my website, ashleydaily.com, represent the opinions of myself. The content discussed on the show should not and does not replace medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. Episodes on Welcome to Wellness may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to depression, suicide, COVID-19, vaccines, events related to the pandemic, 5G, big pharma, nootropics, circumcision, psychedelics, hormones, the Women's Health Initiative, the use of plants medicine, abortion, geoengineering, terrorism, gender, AI, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You are advised to refrain from listening to this podcast if you are likely to be offended or adversely impacted by any of these topics. However, if these topics interest you, you just may have found your tribe. The information or opinions expressed on the Welcome to Wellness show are solely the views of the individuals involved and by no means represent absolute facts, opinions, or expressed by the host, and guests can change at any time. The views of my guests are solely their views, and the Welcome to Wellness show does not accept responsibility for them, and any action you take on the information contained within this show is strictly at your own risk. The Welcome to Wellness host, Ashley Daily, will not be liable for any losses or damages in connections with the use of this podcast. You should take all necessary steps to ascertain the information you receive from this podcast is correct and has been verified. None of the guests or the contributors on the Welcome to Wellness podcast will be responsible for your use of the information contained therewithin. Under no circumstances will the Welcome to Wellness show or my affiliate partners, suppliers, licenses, or guests appearing on the show be liable for any direct or indirect consequential damages arising from your inability to access this podcast. All intellectual property rights belong to me, Ashley Daily, and are included but not limited to the copyright and any other rights in the design. You are permitted to the Welcome to Wellness podcast for personal use, but not for commercial use without license. You may not make recordings of or otherwise copy this podcast. If you breach these terms, you lose the right to access the Welcome to Wellness podcast, and you must destroy or return any copies of the recordings you've made. Guests on the Welcome to Wellness podcast may at times provide information on or read extracts from third-party copyrighted work. The Welcome to Wellness podcast does not provide any medical or professional advice within these episodes. If you take any action or inaction as a result from the content you consume from within the Welcome to Wellness podcast, this is based solely on your decision, and the Welcome to Wellness podcast and Ashley Daily and my guests cannot be held responsible or liable for any of the consequences on such action or inaction. Thank you.